Welcome into another edition of Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy with a broadcast partner from News Radio 780 and 105.9 FM WBBM. Mr. Tom Thayer and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio, moving the chains with Pat Kerwin also joining us today. Coming up in our next segment, we'll be joined by the analyst for the Minnesota Vikings, our good friend Pete Bercich. Thanks to our producers, Jordan Tredup, Dan Barilli, and folks at The Score, Chicago's Sports Radio 670. Good to talk to you guys. A lot to discuss. The best news of all, Tom and Jim, is that every stadium has been cleared now for 100% capacity. The Colts were the last one to come through. And so, boy, we are tapping on the door of normalcy, Big Tom and Jim.
Yeah, how happy does that make every owner in the NFL? Because when you talk about how much that means to what the team can do in the future, they need season ticket holders in the seat. But then when you look at it from the fan perspective, you love the anticipation of the crowd filling the stadium, whether you're home or away. You like to see how important their role is to the NFL. So I'm excited the seats in the stands are going to be filled, and it's going to be an exciting year in the NFL.
Yeah, I think everybody's looking to get back to their traditions, whether it's going down to Soldier Field and tailgating, going in and sitting in their seat, and they know the people right next to them that have probably been season ticket holders for so many years, and they just want to connect again and root and cheer for their football team. So it's good to see. I'm glad the Colts finally were able to make that happen, and I think every fan in the NFL is excited to get this season going.
All right, Jim, I stick with you. We didn't get a chance to talk to you last week. You were at the Senior Bowl Hall of Fame, which was outstanding, by the way, to listen to all the different guys and listening to their perspectives on life right now in football from their days playing it and what's going on and who wants to be in the big Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, et cetera. But the news regarding the Bears over the past couple of weeks, obviously the big news was the anticipation of putting an offer in to the Arlington Park site, and how you feel about that as an ex-Bear who played at Soldier Field, and just what that due diligence means.
Yeah, from my perspective, and I obviously was playing for the Bears when they tore down Soldier Field, and we had to play a couple of years in Champaign. And I always felt the stadium, meaning New Soldier Field, it was short-sighted. They can't even host a Super Bowl. They can't even, minimum you have to have 70,000 fans to host a Super Bowl. Bears only seat 61,000 in Soldier Field. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to really do it right this time. And what I mean by that, if you do a domed stadium in Arlington, you're able to host the Big Ten championship game. You're able to host Final Fours. You're able to host all kinds of events. So I think what city is more perfect for hosting a Super Bowl than Chicago? You've got all the accommodations there. You've got great restaurants. You've got great hotels. That was the concern in Indianapolis. They had to build that JW Marriott hotel in order to really get it approved. The Bears in the city of Chicago already have that infrastructure in place. So to me, it makes all the sense in the world for the Bears to want to pursue this.
And Tom, you've felt similarly. And again, it's all about assets. So whether or not it happens or it doesn't, the investigation is worth the squeeze, no question.
Yeah, I mean, they could build an on-site practice facility there at Arlington. One thing, living downtown and you drive by Soldier Field from the end of the football season till when the weather returns, it sits there dormant. There's no activities. And when you talk about what dome stadium, retractable roof could house during those dormant months for a stadium, you're talking about everybody's going to be able to capitalize on that. And it's not an egregious drive from the city of Chicago out to Arlington Park. So if they were able to host that Big Ten championship game, the Final Four, a Super Bowl, all those wintertime events, everybody's going to benefit from it. It's not going to be people within a 3-block radius of the Arlington facility. So I think from all of us, I and Jim, we're all fortunate to see every stadium that's been built in the NFL, and you see what the possibilities could be here in the Chicagoland area. I think they have to investigate the opportunity.
And we'll be headed to L.A. to see SoFi, which we were not able to go last year, called the game from the studio at WBBM, and then also the Vegas facility. We're going to check that out as well. Jim, you'll be touring training camps again, I am assuming. So that'll be a recharge for you as well to get out of the office and get out of the studio, get out of your home a little bit, because you do learn a heck of a lot. Where are you scheduled to see? Who are you scheduled to see this summer?
Yeah, we're going to hit the Jets. We're going to hit the Patriots. We'll hit Buffalo Bills. We'll hit the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll head south and hit all the Florida teams. We'll head out west, hit the San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks and Denver Broncos. So we've got a big slate of camps that we're going to, and we always try to go when they're in pads. I think you get a really good indicator of what a team is when they're in pads, when they're actually hitting. I think you get a sense of their toughness. I think you get a sense of their identity and what they're going to materialize and ultimately be here this upcoming season.
You know, Tom, everybody asks the same question, and it usually comes with an answer before you can get your answer out. Okay, you meet some fans like I did last weekend downtown Chicago. Hey, what are you looking forward to the most at training camp? You know, and then they say it's got to be Justin Fields, right? And you know, I look at the broader scope. I'm not so signaturely looking at just the quarterback position, but I think it's inescapable. That's what everybody wants to see is the young quarterback, but there's still a lot of other things to see. So beyond Justin, what else would you say are on your list of on your checklist of things you got to see, you want to see at training camp?
Listen, if the Chicago Bears fans completely ignore full pad contact drills, one-on-ones and 9-on-7 and teamwork of Tevin Jenkins, I think you're ignoring a bigger factor going into the season than Justin Fields. Because look, you got to solidify that left tackle position. And when we have a chance to talk to people around the league, they understand how important that role is to the overall success of the offense. If you have versatility and athleticism at the quarterback position, you can kind of, have a plan of attack and how you're going to, figure out where are you vulnerable up in the offensive line, and you can make adjustments accordingly. But you have to see Tevin Jenkins and how he fits in against all those different types of drills that you're going to see him face. I think it's enormous to see. And I also think you're going to have to pay attention to the cornerback position opposite of Jalen Johnson. You're going to have a line there of guys that are looking to fulfill the obligations to that position. And that role, the cornerback position, has an equally important role as the left tackle position in overall offense and defensive success.
Jim, as you look at the roster, what are you looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, I'm with Tom. Left tackle's important. Desmond Trufant, does he still have it? Gas left in the tank, opposite corner. Hey, I want to see Eddie Goldman. He's been away from football for a year. Can he solidify the defensive front and be stout up front? That's going to be a key component to the Bears' defense and stopping the run. And I want to see Sean Desai. How is he going to be as a play caller? You've got a new play caller at the defensive coordinator position. I think all Bears fans should want to keep their eye on that as well.
And NFL players have until tomorrow to opt out of the season, July 2nd. So that'll be interesting if anybody does. And, of course, the angle, Jim, of Aaron Rodgers taking that chance because he'd still preserve a big chunk of his money if he chose to do that.
He may mysteriously come down with diabetes and opt out. I don't know. Anything can happen in these times that we're in right now. So, something tells me he's going to show up. He seems to have really affection for his teammates and has affection for his coaches. It's really more geared towards the front office. So something tells me he's going to be there.
All right, more to come, including our annual visit with the analyst of the Minnesota Vikings as we begin our tour through the NFC North, Pete Bercich. That's coming up next here on Bears All Access on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. Welcome back to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Choose clean energy for your home at IGS.com because every good choice adds up to a better world. With Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak, Jim Miller from SiriusXM, NFL Radio's Moving the Chains. And please, for our now annual excursion through the NFC North, we stop first to the Minnesota Vikings, and due reason, not because we don't want to talk about Green Bay or Detroit, but we got a Chicago area guy in the mix here. Pete Bercich, the veteran analyst for the Minnesota Vikings radio network, the former Vikings player, the former coach, and Providence New Lenox star, along with the Golden Domer. Pete, how you doing this summer?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Trying to work our way through normalcy. I mean, that's the number one thing. We're going to have people at training camp at Haddelsoff for the first time ever. I don't know what your team's plans are for training camp, but that's the most exciting part for me. Yeah, we want to see these guys on the grass, but it's the fans getting to see them up close and personal for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, the Vikings will have fans in the seats for training camp. So I know they've announced that, for the media and for us, the people that are dealing, with the players a little more closely. That's going to get back to normal. I mean, with everybody, getting vaccinated, it is going to feel a little bit more like the old school training camp instead of what we had to deal with last year.
Pete, you got the longest tenured coach in the NFL that hasn't won a championship, Mike Zimmer, after 8 years. But you also have Kirk Cousins. So when you get those fans to surround the practice field, who's going to have more pressure when their feet get on the field? Is it going to be Zimmer or is it going to be the quarterback Cousins?
Well, that's a great question. We're one of the longest franchises without a Super Bowl win. We've never had one either. So, I think that's a great question only because I think Zimmer is secure in his position because you put Zimmer, and Rick Spielman kind of together. But I think he's pretty secure in his position. The only thing that's been changing a lot are his assistant coaches, the guys that are underneath him. That's kind of the only thing where if you take a step back, you kind of, scratch your head, especially on offense with the Kubiaks and with all these guys that have been rolling through. But I do think Cousins now, with Kellen Mond, we have him kind of in the background a little bit. I think it's going to fall on the shoulders of Cousins, and I think most of the fans are going to put it on the shoulders of Cousins this year.
Well, Pete, Jim Miller here. I come from Detroit, so Lions fans take offense to what you just said. At least you've been 4 times. But I talked to you a couple of weeks ago. When you look at this Minnesota Vikings roster, to me, it's one of the best Zimmer's ever built. We talked to you a couple of weeks ago on Sirius. Sheldon Richardson, you get Danielle Hunter back, Anthony Barr's back, Kendricks is healthy. This defense could be something special for the Minnesota Vikings.
You're absolutely right. I think you take a look at the guys that you bring inside, and we have a couple younger guys like Janarius Robinson, who was a 4th-round draft pick kid from Florida State, who did a film study on him and loved the kid. But we got better up front. We definitely got better with the D linemen, and that's where it all begins. And when you get Anthony Barr back healthy and you have Eric Kendricks, if those guys can move to the football, really what we want to do is play 2 deep safety, and we want to play kind of a gap and a half type of thing up front. And you can't do that with backup linemen. You need to have guys up front, that can play a gap and a half. And I think we've brought some of those guys in, and defensively we're going to be heading in the right direction. No question about it.
Yeah. Throw in Dalvin Tomlinson, Stephen Weatherly, and then the back end. We always seem to talk about your secondary because it changes fairly frequently, except for Harrison Smith there. But Patrick Peterson at 31, as you look at him and where he's at in his career, how big of an impact will he make at the corner position? And then pairing Harrison with Xavier Woods now at safety.
Yeah, I think, Xavier Woods is kind of a poor man's Harrison Smith. And, what do I mean by that? Xavier Woods, when you watch him on film, he can do a little bit of everything. He's versatile, right? He's down in the paint. He blitzes. He's covering a little bit of man-to-man. He's playing some deep half, some deep quarters. So you saw the Dallas Cowboys use him kind of in every way. And that's really the strength of Harrison Smith, is that when he walks up to the line of scrimmage, the quarterback has to respect him because he's a good blitzer. He's also pretty good in run support, and he's good in coverage. He's not the best at his position, I think, in any one of these categories. But he definitely is probably the most all-around safety there is. And you're pairing him with another guy in Xavier Woods that's kind of the same way. I don't think he's as good as Harrison Smith, but he can do all those things. So you can blitz and you can walk him down. And so that's going to allow Zimmer and the defense to play some games with those safeties, right? One of Woods will walk up, Harrison Smith will walk up. So it's going to give him a lot of versatility. Patrick Peterson is just going to give us some type, at least give us a stabilizing force out at the corner position. It's been it's been musical chairs with guys coming in and out, guys getting hurt. And, watching Peterson last year, he got guys behind him. Sometimes I think those were issues that he had with Budda Baker and communication. But I think if he faced the number one receiver for the Arizona Cardinals last year, week in and week out. And if he doesn't have to do that with the Vikings, and we could just sprinkle him in or give him a break and not put so much on those 30-some-year-old legs, I think you can get a good year out of him.
Pete, at the end of the season, Minnesota MVP, Dalvin Cook or Justin Jefferson?
I think Dalvin Cook still is going to be the MVP, and mainly because so much of what our offense does is based on him. With the play action passing game, with the way Dalvin can pass block, and again, his explosiveness in the running game. I think he is, and this is not to take away from the young man, but Dalvin Cook is what makes this offense go. He does. Justin Jefferson, he fits this thing perfectly in what Cousins wants to do with the play action and getting the ball deep down the field when you're trying to cover him one-on-one. You have 8 guys in the box to stop Dalvin Cook. Yeah, then we're going to get you with our wide receivers. But yeah, it all starts and stops, I think, with Dalvin Cook.
Well, key
MVP.
Spot,
he's our MVP right now.
All right.
Yeah. Well, a key spot up front is going to be that left tackle position. And much like the Chicago Bears that have Tevin Jenkins, who they drafted, Christian Darrisaw, by all indicators, he's the real deal. What are the early indicators that you see, Pete?
Well, he missed a little bit of time because he had a abdominal injury in college that flared up on him. Christian Darrisaw is going to be as good as he wants to be, and I think I kind of look at Tom in this respect, and you see these guys that are so big and they're so athletic. They get drafted in the first round. It's just because of their height, weight, speed. They're immeasurable. They're measurables, excuse me. But it's the immeasurables that are going to make this kid. If he can stay healthy, and if he will, if he works hard, and it's hard to even speak those words to say, yeah, if this guy comes in and just works hard, he's going to be a great pro. But that's the case. I mean, he's a monster of a kid. Great feet, can recover, can do all those things the scouts talk about. It's just a matter of him putting it all together. So you got your fingers crossed. And we know that with the way spring ball is in college and with the way these college kids come out, they're less and less refined. There's more and more for them to learn from a technique standpoint. Mentally, tackle's not as hard as most positions. You block the defensive end 90% of the time, you're going to be right. You know what I'm saying? It's not that mentally, it's not that much of a challenge. It's the physical challenge, and he's going to be going against the best defensive players in the world week after week after week at that position. Does he have the mental toughness to compete? You can't take a snap off. You can't have a bad quarter. You can't have a bad series. You can't. So that's the only question with him. And fingers crossed, he's going to be the left tackle for the next 4 or 5, 10 years, I guess.
Well, Pete, the one thing, Pete Bercich, analyst for the Minnesota Vikings and Chicago area product, joining us here on Bears All Access with Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak, Jim Miller. One more round of questions from us. You also left out the one important thing. You alluded to Tom as one of those big guys coming out of college, but he also has the Neanderthal gene, and right. So he comes in as a badass. And right. He's never going to change, right? He's still that way right now.
Right. If you look in the scouting Bible, there's a definite personality difference between guard and tackle, right? The guard is the guy that's going to try to date your sister and take her out, right? The guard is the guy that you got to keep an eye on. They're the dirty ones. They're the mean ones. And the tackles are just, they're a little more calm and, this kind of flow and or whatever. But you gotta be, to be an offensive guard, you got to have a little, what in your neck. And so I don't trust him as far as I can throw him.
Hey, Pete, what about your once in a decade transition at the tight end position? You got rid of Kyle Rudolph, and now You know, there's still a lot of high expectations for that position because what it means to Dalvin Cook in the running game, what it means to the passing game. But how is that going to transition at that position?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think in this day and age with all the 5-man fronts, the bear fronts and things that you see, a good run blocking tight end is a necessity. I did a study on all of Dalvin Cook's big runs from last year, and amazingly, Kyle Rudolph was in quite a bit of those. And that Kyle Rudolph was in, what I'm saying is Kyle's not the guy pile driving these defensive ends and moving bodies. It's the threat of the pass, and then the threat of the pass at the same time. Kyle was a good blocker at best. Irv Smith Jr. Is a little bit more of a fullback type of a body, not as tall and long. And Irv Smith Jr. was in for quite a those plays, and a lot of those were him coming out of the backfield, some misdirection things. So with Irv, we have another guy, Tyler Conklin, who we really thought was more of a run blocker, but he wasn't on the field much for these runs. He's more of a receiving tight end, but it's Irv Smith Jr.'s show. We've seen it with tight ends. In your guy that you guys have I would love to have him. What's he, Notre Dame guy? I forget his name off the top of my head. But
Komet.
Yeah, Komet. And the reason why is because he can do both, right? He's a good blocker and he's a good receiver, but Komet would be, I think, a perfect fit for us. But it takes a while. It takes a couple years for tight ends to develop. I mean, they got to learn the run game. They got to learn all the fundamentals of run blocking. They got to do it from the left side, the right side. And then they got to learn how to run routes and memorize the pass tree and do all those other things. So Irv Smith Jr. is kind of, I think, a quiet little key for our offense. If he can really take it to that next level and be a threat, because I don't know who our number 3 receiver is going to be. You guys, you guys probably are wondering too. Maybe not. Maybe you don't care. I don't blame you. But who's that number 3 receiving threat? And right now, Irv Smith might be our number 3 receiver too.
Well, it's interesting. Zimmer put his number on Pro just to motivate Olabisi and the other guys that are behind him, BB as well. I thought that was pretty interesting right before you guys leave for training camp. Last one for me, Pete, and always appreciate your time. When you look at Mike Zimmer as a coach, typically he's been a pretty conservative coach, but all the pieces look to be in place that you just explained. Do you think he's more aggressive this year in 2021, knowing the roster that he has in place?
Maybe aggressive in play calling. I don't think with Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson, that's 650 pounds of bodies in the middle. I think when our defense is playing at its best, it's a little more conservative. It's a little bit more of the two deep shell type of a game that he plays. That's when our defense is at its best. It's not a pin your ears back and blitz and get after him. So from a play calling standpoint, I think defensively he might get a little bit more conservative. I think offensively is where you're going to see, I think maybe hopefully a little bit more, not I would say explosivity, but just some more chances, I guess, being taken, being a little bit more creative.
Fourth down and things of that
nature. And here's another thing too, with fans in the stands again, for the first time, you have a whole pile of rookies from last year that have no idea what crowd noise is all about. They have no idea what it's like, when you're playing defense and it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and inches and you're at home and you have the crowd noise. The coaches have to kind of get used to that too. The coaches are going to have to go back and say, all right, yeah, we couldn't do this. We couldn't hard count all the time. We couldn't do all these different things because we're on the road and the crowd noise, and that's all coming back as well too. So, but Zimmer is definitely methodical. He's not a gambler by nature on defense as a play caller. But again, and I think the other part of it too is special teams. Special teams have been a bit of a thorn in our side. We don't know who our punt returner is going to be. We don't know who our kick returner is going to be. Not that that's as important as it used to be. But I'd like to see him get a little bit more, some fakes. I think he might get a little more aggressive that way, only because he's going to have, I think, a lot more confidence in his defense.
Well, you mentioned thorn in the side. The Bears have been to the Minnesota Vikings and Kirk Cousins. 1-4 record for Cousins at quarterback against beloved Navy Blue and Orange. And now we're not going to see it for 6 months. We don't play the Vikings until Monday night at Soldier Field, December 20th, and that your place to wrap things up as we always do on January 9th. So, Pete, it's been nice knowing you until then.
Well, and that's I have a question for you guys. Is your, the schedule, you take a look at it, 17 games, it's a bit of, but it's all division heavy in the second half. I think all of our division games are the last 8 weeks of the season. Now, I don't know if that's just a Viking specific thing, or is that something the league is doing now, trying to get all those division games? Because, with that being the case, you can almost look at it and say, hey, if we start slowly, not too worried about it, because the real games, the important games, are all in the second half of the season.
Well, that's a fair point because, also it's survival of the fittest by then too. Roster erosion due to injury and whatnot, that could come into play in the division, and so many wild card stories. You can't really predict what's going to happen, and you never can. That's why I always laugh when the writers start to, this is what the record's going to be when the schedule comes out in April. It never works out that way. Pete, we got to run. Thank you so much. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Pete.
Another segment coming up here on Bears All Access with Tom Thayer, Jim Miller. I'm Jeff Joniak on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. The Chicago Bears Network presents Inside the Bears, brought to you by Verizon. Anthony Adams and Lauren Screeden cover the world of Bears football on and off the field every Sunday night at 10:35 p.m. on Fox 32 Chicago, or watch anytime at chicagobears.com or on the Bears official app. Welcome back to our program tonight, Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy with Tom Thayer and Jim Miller. I'm Jeff Joniak. Just heard from Pete Bercich, the longtime analyst for the Vikings. There were so many things, fellas, that we didn't get to talk about because the interesting aspect of Gary Kubiak no longer there, but son Clint, Jim, as the offensive coordinator now. They keep it in the family up there with Mike Zimmer's kid Adam as the co-defensive coordinator. They're running out of siblings and so forth up there.
Yeah, well, you look at it. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski was a really good play caller. He moves on to the Cleveland Browns, but really, Kevin and Clint grew up together. They were always under Gary Kubiak, and he kind of took them under his wing. And, I think they're both fantastic coaches. And I think Clint really isn't going to stray away from what his dad has really wanted to do. It's really about the outside zone run, and it's about the play action pass off it. They do a lot of bootlegs. They do a lot of play action. They've got two fantastic receivers. Plus, I believe Irv Smith is a pretty strong tight end. So I don't think Clint is going to stray from the script. He knows what they do well, and they're going to stick with their bread and butter, and they've got a good defense to back it up.
And Tom, when you look now at the Vikings depth chart and you hear all those names, especially the big beef up front defensively, how it matches up with what the Bears are going to want to be in 2021 offensively with Andy Dalton getting rid of the ball quick, getting it to the guys in the right areas at the right moment. He's a confident quarterback in the pocket, and he knows how to trigger. He's got poison there. But the guys up front, as you alluded to in the first segment tonight about Tevin Jenkins, it's the entire offensive line in general now to deal with that. How do you see the Bears matching up with the Vikes?
What's weird, Jeff, and you brought it up with Pete. The first time the Vikings play the Bears, it's beyond the halfway point of the season. So what we're dreaming of and talking about, and I know all these people said, the Minnesota Vikings have one of the top 10 rosters in the NFL. What are we, July 1st? Yep. It doesn't matter. It's because what team are they going to be facing when they face each other the first time? So, yeah, if Minnesota stays healthy on the defensive side of the ball and Mike Zimmer gets some consistency in his lineup, and some of these guys that they signed at 30 plus years old can hold together for the entirety of the season, that's exactly what Mike Zimmer is looking for. He's going to let the offensive coaches coach the offense. But now you got to talk about Kirk Cousins. Is he going to be the efficient quarterback in which they dreamed of when they signed him a couple of years ago from Washington? Is Dalvin Cook going to be the running back who's capable of being one of the best in the NFL at that position? And is Justin Jefferson going to be able to answer the bell in year two? Because he's not going to start as an unknown. He's going to be known as their star quality football player. And every defensive coordinator is going to try to put together packages, how to take him not off of the field, but out of the game to limit his impact. So there is so much that is going to change in between now and the first time the Bears see the Minnesota Vikings.
All true, Jim. But, This is what football brings to the table. This is why the NFL is so great. We can talk about this stuff July 1st and dream about the matchups. By the way, coming up in our next segment, we're going to preview our next position group. Last week, Jim, you missed out on the offensive line. We're going to tackle the receivers in our next segment. But, the thing about Zimmer that I respect, they're going to be competitive no matter what. He's never lost. He's never had less than 7 wins. He took his team to the NFC title game just a few years ago in 17. The Bears were great in 18. So, the rebound is expected for both because of the types of star quality they have on both sides of the field. Look at Dalvin Cook. You take Aaron Rodgers out of the mix, he might be the best player overall in the division if it's not Aaron Rodgers in terms of his impact.
Well, here's when I think of Zimmer, right? He's a defensive coordinator by trade. Let me just give you their defensive statistics from last year. They finished 27th overall in the NFL. They were 29th in stopping teams scoring. They were 27th against the run. They were 25th against the pass. They were 28th in sacks. These things do not sit well when you're a head coach and you're a defensive coordinator. That has to be corrected. That's where they directed all their attention here this offseason, and Zimmer will not let that. I can guarantee you every week he gets in front of that defense, he's going to tell them how bad they sucked last year defensively, because that's where his stamp is. It's on defense, and he wants that to emerge again.
And, Tom, I feel the same way about Matt Nagy in front of his offense.
Yes.
If you don't think that sits well with him, what's happened the last couple of years, I think that is as big a story as Zimmer's defense in Minnesota.
Oh, no doubt about it. And, you always have to have that caveat, that asterisk, if Aaron Rodgers, however you want to finish that sentence, because I think it elevates the role of each of these head coaches because they've been around their teams for a period of time. They have a real confidence that if Zimmer's defense stays healthy, he can provide a spark for the team. If Andy Dalton continues to emerge as the starting quarterback in the development of Justin Fields, this offense has potential ahead of it. And so, both of these coaches, they have a lot of, I think they have, it's not pressure. I think they have a lot of confidence and they can bring to the table what's needed from their football team and their players.
And I think there's a more weaponry on the skill set that fits Matt Nagy's scheme and what he wants to do. We'll broach that. The receivers coming up next as we do our camp breakdown ahead of the July 27th start at Hallis Hall with Jim Miller and Tom Thayer. I'm Jeff Joniak on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy. Visit athletico.com to request an appointment in clinic or virtually and start feeling better tomorrow. I got two guys, 2 ex-NFL players with significant NFL experience that gets through the rehab with hip replacements, knee replacements. You guys could speak to all this. Tom just had one. How's that been? And what advice would you give to other NFL players that put in the time you did, a decade plus in the league, not to mention your experience at the high school and college level, to prepare for what's next and how to stay active and stay ready for anything, because you just don't, you're not a guy that's not going to sit around. Neither is Jim.
Right. I mean, I just think you got to be diligent about any type of rehab you ever go throughout the course of your career. If you're a young high school kid that has an injury and then you have to go to physical therapy, be diligent about it because it's going to help you in the long run. It's the same thing after hip replacement. The process of going through the physical therapy is the reason why I feel as good as I do right now. I don't feel like I'm any more inhibited in anything I can do. The first thing I asked the doctor, can I surf after I get this thing done? He goes, I've never had that question asked of me, but we'll see as the process goes. And so I went to see him a couple of weeks ago and he says, I wouldn't stop you from doing anything you want. So, listen, man, we're super fortunate in the world of today that we have procedures that we can have in order to get back on our feet. And I feel just as good today as I ever have.
Jim, what's the checklist on you? You've had a lot done on that battered body as a former NFL quarterback. But, you got a smile on your face. You're still doing what you love. But did you handle your rehab for all the different surgeries and then replacements that you've had? And did you do it according to plan, or did you? Are you one of those guys that said, like most people, they don't do exactly what they're told to do?
Right. No, I'm like Tom. You got to attack it, because you want to live life. For Tom, whether it's surfing and getting back to things that he enjoys. For me, it was about playing with my kids. I want to be able to go out and throw a football with my sons, teach them sports, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, you name it. And I want to show them how to compete. And so much like your rehab, you got to compete, you got to attack it, you got to get after it, if those are the things that you want to be able to do. And so I took it pretty serious, just like Tom, and everything worked out just fine. So I went through that surgery a couple of times. It's not fun, but I'm glad I did it because I'm able to live and enjoy all the things that I want to do in order to teach my kids how to compete and play sports as well.
All right, let's tackle the wide receiver position for the Bears in the 2021 camp. I'm going to throw you guys this right out of the gate because I feel it's extremely important, as is the slot corner on the other side. The best slot receiver on the Bears, the guy who can sink into his cuts and find those openings in very tight phone booth areas and move the sticks and threaten the defense from that position. Tom, let's start with you and go to Jim. There are many candidates. And you could even throw, the top receiver on the team in that mix. He's good at that. But how important is that for the eyesight of the quarterback and just the overall effectiveness of the offense if you have a slot receiver that can really be dangerous and own the middle of the field?
God, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the tight end position, whether it's Jimmy Graham or Cole Kmet, because the tight end is going to be a big interior pass catching athlete that can attract them a lot of attention, especially if he becomes featured in this offense. And then you think about some of the speed they brought in to compete at that slot receiver. Now, if they can have the element of speed and concern on the other side, it is going to continue to open up opportunities for the outside guy, but it's going to provide a bigger window of opportunity for the quarterback in the interior of the field. And I'm interested to see what is the future of a guy like Tariq Cohen, because I do still believe that he's a type of guy with his skills and his open field kind of threatening ability that he could kind of morph into that slot receiver. So now you're talking about the development of depth. You can keep Darnell Mooney on the outside with Allen Robinson. Now when you got Bird and Goodwin and Tariq Cohen and stuff, you have a variety of guys and styles that you can put at that position.
Yeah, I think for me, I think clearly the Bears want it to be Miller. They want it to be Anthony Miller. He's had 49 receptions last year, but clearly the message has been sent, right? He's been on the trade block. They brought in competition to challenge him. He, to me, has to take the next step when you look at Anthony Miller. So whether it's maturity, whether it's more polish, he should have been working his fanny off this whole offseason because every message for him to get the light bulb to go off has been sent to motivate him. So to me, Anthony Miller is really a guy in the spotlight.
Right. I feel, and I've banged the table for this guy for the time he got. I just felt he'd be an excellent slot receiver because he's got the quickness to get away after the catch. He's got some physicality to him, but you got to be in the right place to the right time. And that's the message sent down. So that brings us to Damir Bird. I'll start with you, Jim, because he did have an excellent season with New England last year, and he's got all that speed to play that position.
Yeah, I like Damir Bird. I think he's a solid guy that you can count on. He has the size that you're looking for from that standpoint. And, he's got the quick juice that to get where you need. He's just a little jitterbug that he's going to compete at that position. So another opportunity for him, I should say, to really overtake Anthony Miller. So I think really it's up to him and what he comes in to do. But I think he's a steady guy that you can count on, and that's what he brings to the table coming from New England.
Tom, what are your expectations for Darnell Mooney? Because Allen Robinson now is taking him under his wing. I think he's looking up to Allen. They're working out together, and Allen gave him the blessing last week of watch out for what this guy is capable of doing.
Well, I think it goes back to a message Matt Nagy delivered in the course of OTAs and mandatory minicamp, that because of what Andy Dalton is going to deliver, you better be in the right spot, you better be in the right place, and you better have immediate expectations that the ball is going to be in your face. It's not going to be something where the quarterback's going to sit there and wait, see you open, and then throw the ball. He's going to put the ball in the position like the play is drawn up. So I think whether it's Darnell Mooney or Anthony Miller, any one of these receivers, you better be in the right spot And I like that message that was delivered early by Matt Nagy about the traits and the thinking process of Andy Dalton, because it's not going to be in a general vicinity. No, it's going to be where you're expected to be. If it's 12 yards and in, be 12 yards and in. Don't be 10.5 yards. Don't be 14 yards. So I like the exact science to the offense, because I think you can be more threatening if everybody understands their exact role and not the general concept of the offense.
All right, tell you what, we're going to continue the conversation because there are many more receivers to discuss. Our final segment just ahead here on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by CDW. People to get it. One more to go. Our final segment with Tom Thayer and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio, moving the chains with Pat Kerwin. Jim, July 15th is the deadline to get any deal done with franchise players in the league, and that includes Allen Robinson. Do you have any inclination that there could be an agreement, or will this just carry on through?
Yeah, I think it'll just carry on through. I think Allen Robinson will play under the franchise tag. He is the Bears' #1 wide receiver, and I think he'll be a true pro like he's always been a pro. I don't think he's happy about it. I'm sure he did want to get a long-term deal, but the Bears have to, they have every right to place the franchise tag on it and let this play out. And so another year will pass. I think Allen Robinson will prove to be who he is, and then the Bears will have another decision to make. The key after that is, who's going to emerge, because the Bears have drafted the young receivers like a Riley Ridley. Anthony Miller still needs to prove himself. And you look at Javon Wims, who will have an opportunity. Can any of these players step up and really replicate what Allen Robinson has done? So that's why the Bears drafted him. And who knows, he might be leaving in free agency next year, or the Bears will have a decision to slap another franchise tag or really extend him and really ink him to a lucrative contract. I think he'll be a pro's pro about it, though, and he understands the position he's in, and he's got an opportunity to prove himself and show his worth to the entire NFL.
200 receptions and nearly 2,400 yards, Tom, over the last 2 years with the Bears. And, he said all the right things at the veteran mandatory minicamp about what he is planning to do. He sees great potential still for himself as a player. He's not hit his ceiling yet, and he's working hard to deliver on an addition of speed with the ball in his hands after the catch, which, in this day and age in the NFL, you can't get everything with long bombs down the field. You got to get guys with the ball in the hands and get them yards after the catch to move those sticks, and he has that capability.
Yards after the catch sometimes are because of the quarterback is so efficient and where he's placing the football in terms of how close the coverage is to him. And he said, look, I would like to turn a 8-yard catch into a 12-yard catch. So he's not looking at things unrealistically. But when we look at things, we have to look at things from a business standpoint and then a player standpoint, because I admire everything Allen Robinson has ever shown to the Bears fans, the organization, what he's willing to do, and the type of influence and the clout he carries inside the locker room. And then you have to look at it from a business standpoint. When you look at what the salary demand is, for those top couple receivers in the league, that's when you have to start weighing the player against the pay. Allen Robinson, love the guy. I think he demands and he commands the respect he gets, but then you have to start looking at it financially.
All right, lastly, before we go, Marquise Goodwin, he will be at training camp because he did participate in the long jump at the Olympic trials in Eugene, did not become a member of that unit, headed to Japan. And I think after an opt-out season, Jim, his body feels fresh. If he can stay healthy, you're adding a lot of speed again to this mix, but the health is always a concern.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, for him, I think he's a veteran player that they're going to be able to count on. I think he's hungry to return to the sport. He's obviously very competitive, as you mentioned, trying to train for the Olympics. So I think he brings a lot to the table. And I think, again, he's going to be a message sender to all those young receivers, whether it's Anthony Miller, whether it's Damir Bird, whether it's Javon Wims. This is what it takes to be a pro. And he's been a pro for a long time, and he'll definitely add something to the mix for the Bears at wide receiver. He's a guy you can count on.
You know, real quickly, Jeff, I don't think we can't underscore the important role that these guys are going to take on special teams. Who of these speedsters are going to be able to handle that role? Because it means a lot to field position success for the Bears.
That's Tom Thayer, Jim Miller. Jim, thanks. We'll talk to you next week. That'll do it for Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Have a good night, everybody. This is Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score.